I always was a big saver, but I think velocity might be like the word to remember here, whether it's velocity in your learning, your personal life, your goals, or your money. You want to make sure that your money's working for you, because that's how you're going to get to the lifestyle that you want to have.
Welcome back, wealthy women. I'm so excited that you're here with us today for another edition of Women Creating Wealth. I have got a real treat for you today because we have got Lindsay Lovell. She is a coach, a speaker, a real estate investor. You're going to love some of this stuff. She's co-founder of 3 businesses. She had an explosive, successful start in real estate investing, which is the kind of start we all want to have. In just the first 18 months, she scaled from 0 to 36 properties and reached her goal of financial freedom along the way. Her portfolio consists of 72 long-term rentals and 12 short-term. And along the way, Lindsay co-founded G6 Capital Management LLC, which has over 16 million in long-term and short-term rental assets under management. And she also co-founded Value Assistance, which is an answer to the problem that she faced when trying to hire or find reliable virtual assistants when starting her business. So this is what I love about a true entrepreneur. It's like, okay, yes, I am in the, now I am in the real estate space, but there was this problem. And I just thought, well, if I have this problem, other people do too. So I'm just going to start a business doing that. And I just love that attitude.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Christine. Super excited to be here, and glad that the path of an entrepreneur that sometimes other people look at and say, what were you thinking, makes sense to another fellow entrepreneurial woman.
My worst question is people say, what do you do? I'm like, today I'm working on this, but last week or yesterday. Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, but it's fun. That's a really remarkable meteoric success that you had in real estate investing. So how did that happen? Was it like you knew nothing and just found a book and started going, or had you sort of been working your way into real estate a little at a time? Give us the skinny.
The first thing that you mentioned in terms of, it was something I stumbled on. I wasn't knowledgeable in all this before. I learned it along the way, and I share that to just give people, the background that anybody can do it. So I had spent my life, working hard, thinking if I get good grades, go to a good school, get the right job, which I did all of that, you'll have that American dream of wealth. And I found myself working more hours, enjoying my job less, paying more taxes, and just being like, this can't be what I worked for. And along that same time, a global pandemic broke out. And at that time, I was working, as it does once in a while, throws a little loop. And I was working in healthcare, where my job was to go to cancer clinics. And so clearly that came to a screeching halt at the time, but I was blessed to still be getting a paycheck and have a job, but I couldn't do my work. And being the type of person that I am, I was like, I had always had a couple side hustles, all those side hustles, consulting and everything kind of came to an end. And so I was like, I need to learn something. I need to do something else. And my husband was like, you're terrible at the stock market. Let's maybe have you talk to Jason, who is a friend of his, that he did sales with, that owned, a couple hundred doors in Kansas City. And I was like, that sounds intimidating, but okay. So jumped on a call with Jason. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this community is people are so willing to pay it forward. So jumped on a call with Jason, he shared his sheet, and, I was like, what does COC, ROI, where do we get all these numbers? Totally overwhelmed. But he's like, just start listening to podcasts. So I started listening to Bigger Pockets. And at first it sounds like, Chinese, what they're saying. And what's this B with 400 R's after it? And, make no sense, and wholesaling. And then you start to pick it up, and you start to realize that people on there, like me, like you, we all have similar stories. None of us were rocket scientists in the sense of, it just takes the desire. And so I started doing that research in May of 2020. I bought my first house in July. And doing the BRRRR method, I was just able to snowball and rinse and repeat and find a very reasonably priced market to be able to grow to where I did in that first time period.
But it doesn't just take, maybe there's a component of luck and timing and hard work and all that kind of stuff. It's more than that. It takes balls. You could have just bought one in that time period.
Yep. So and I appreciate that. And I think, for me, I'm very conservative. So taking a risk, it was kind of a big leap out of my comfort zone to that point. And so for the first house, I just said, look, if we put in this money and this all goes away, I can still sleep at night. May not be the best dreams, but I'm going to be okay. And so took that calculated risk. And as I learned, and there's so many ways you can run a deal, right? In the sense of your numbers before you dive into it. So what might be comfortable for me may not be comfortable for you. And learning that, and learning that you just have to stay within your lane and comfort zone, helps you get through some of that. Like, this is way out of my comfort zone. It can be stressful. Doesn't completely eliminate it, but it helps.
I think you're the perfect blend of risk taking and analysis, right? I mean, right? You could do analysis paralysis. You could keep running numbers on 3,000 properties, or you could, on the other hand, say like, oh, we're all in, let's mortgage our house and let's do this. And that can be a good strategy when the market's going up, right? Because it is fairly easy, to make money when the market's going up. But if you don't have that nice balance, then when the market starts to do something funny, you're going to be all in and have nothing to fall back on.
Exactly. And that's why I always say the most important time is when you buy a deal and when you have to exit a deal, and just set up when you buy that deal to make sure that you're not going to have to exit on terms that you don't want to.
So you bought your first house, you renovated it, you bought it, renovated it, refurbished it, rented it, and repeated. That's the BRRRR method. Are you handy? Are you and your husband handy?
I am probably the least handy person. You not me near a hammer. And we do all of ours long distance. So we live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So there is no way we could have done this.
You're not buying there, right?
Nope. If we hadn't gotten comfortable, to your point, way out of our comfort zone of buying in, coincidentally, where we ended up buying, I had gone to for a couple of work trips because I used to call in the hospital there, but St. Joseph, Missouri was never a place that we had any plans to go to, or really, had ever thought about, since my couple work trips there. And 99.9% of our stuff is done sight unseen, purchasing, relying on our team and our handyman there.
For people who are thinking about starting that, it does somewhat cut into your profit, right? When you have to pay people to do the work. If you are handy, by the same token, it's a lot faster to hire people and get that thing up and running sooner. So just depends on how good you are, how handy you are, if it's going to be a time savings or a cost savings or not.
Yeah. And I always just, I've started to stop and look at my life and I say, if I outsource this, can I be doing something that makes me more money, more joy, more, happy in life?
Exactly.
Right. And so I started doing that even in my personal life with things. It's okay to outsource. You going and spending hours and hours painting may not be worth it if you enjoy it and you can be quick. So yeah, to your point, and it also depends on, like, I do very cosmetic rehabs, which means I probably could go do them myself if I lived in the area, but I don't recommend that people go and try and do a full rehab themselves, their first one, if they've never done it before. So, there's ways to teach yourself to get to that point.
You didn't find this on a work trip, right? How did you become introduced to this part of the country?
Yeah. So again, going back to how amazing that community is. So I, again, being analytic, had my sheet and was looking at all my KPIs, and I thought, okay, I live near enough that I can maybe go to Reno, to your point, work on things, see the house. And I reached out on Bigger Pockets to a couple of people that live in Reno. And this young gentleman was like, yeah, I live in Reno, but I don't invest here. It's also overpriced, doesn't make sense. I invest in St. Joseph, Missouri. And I was like, well, that's funny. I've actually been there. He graciously took me under his wing and, started to help me build out my team in St. Joseph. So an agent, a contractor, property manager, all of that. I was just so excited and into it. I just started reaching out to every wholesaler I could on any Facebook page, and scouring for deals. And so the first deal I bought was actually $25,000 house. Can be out there, right? Pay more than that for a parking spot out here, but
no kidding.
It's out there. Put $20,000 worth of rehab and it refinanced for $62,000. So I was on my way, but I did it with a wholesaler, and having my agent as my boots on the ground was my first one off market deal.
And what is it about St. Joseph, Missouri that is so appealing to investors? I mean, obviously $25,000 house, like you say.
Now it comes with a grain of salt, right? So since I've evolved and learned, like, I also understand that these are older homes. Yes. I've also upped my price point a little bit because of the tenant level that you get. So I have a higher eviction rate in those homes, whereas the ones that I bought that were over $100,000 in St. Joseph, Missouri. So still very reasonable, not an issue. So, you learn, and that's one of the things I like to bring to my students is, hey, I've already made this mistake, so we're going to up your budget a little bit. Yeah. But what I like about St. Joe, and ironically, if I had stuck to just the numbers on my sheet and went into data analysis paralysis and had to find the perfect market, like many of us get into, I would have never done St. Joe, because the population is flat. It's not growing an employer. It wasn't growing a ton in, median value, but I had someone who was willing to show me the way. So I was more likely to take action. And since he knew the market, there are markets where, people just never leave, but they don't have the money or ability to get a down payment. And so you have a constant pool of renters and an opportunity to kind of gentrify and provide safe, clean places that maybe weren't that beforehand.
And did you stay there? Is that primarily where your investments are now?
No, so I also, being very conservative, right? Like wanting to mix my conservativeness with me now going out and taking a risk. I went into different markets, and it's interesting because I had some other informal mentors be like, you're, spraying the fire hose, you're gonna, this is all wrong. And I was like, this is what's working for me, right? Part of it was just me on Facebook Marketplace. My next second or third deal, I found an 8-plex that someone was selling in Murray, Kentucky. Can't say I've been there, right? But it was like, okay, I found this. Nobody else has approached them. I think it works. And for me, what I found is getting into any market, the key has been a rockstar real estate agent. So if you can find a rockstar real estate agent who can connect you with all the right people in the market, including a contractor, if you're going to do BRRRR, that really is how I've gotten to move and gain traction. There's work every time. So you don't want to go into markets you can never go into again, but it's not, if you're comfortable relying on your team, which I am, it's very possible.
Correct me if I'm wrong or whatever, but to me, I feel like working with a team, especially a remote team, in this case, right, you've got the real estate agent, they have a relationship with that person. And so they're going to want to do a good job so that they can get more referrals. But also when they talk to you, there has to be some level of respect there. They have to, if they thought you were a complete idiot, they would probably still a little bit take advantage of you, right? So do you feel like you've developed the lingo, or is there a language that now that you feel more comfortable talking to people and just holding your own?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you grow and as you can call and just say, hey, I've got this X portfolio. And, when somebody throws out 5-1 arm, you're not like Googling, they don't hear in the background. Like,
Hold on.
I
just have to sneeze.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely comes with time, but people typically want to help. I will say, fortunately, unfortunately, I think the ones you always have to be most careful with tends to be contractors, is really just having that buttoned up and double checking. Agents, I don't think are going to, you just want to make sure that they're not forcing a deal on you. Yes, they are motivated financially, but they also want you to have a good deal and be repeat business. So like with anything, it comes with time and you get your stride, but the lingo is not rocket science.
Yeah.
You probably can pick it up pretty quickly. So, have that confidence in yourself.
Yeah. And I would say too, I was actually thinking of contractors when I asked that question, because any homeowner, any person who's ever tried to do any work in the world has come up against some people who I've actually had people try to tell me that the plan that I have is not going to be as good as a plan that, well, you don't want to put that there, lady. You want to like, dude, this is way over your pay grade. That's where that thing's going, but it takes some confidence to say no to someone who knows, right? It's their job. They've done this before. Maybe you haven't. And you're like, oh, get sort of beat into submission.
Yeah. And I think too, for better or worse, sometimes they see us as a woman and think, oh, she doesn't, just blonde woman from California. What does she know out here in St. Joseph, Missouri? We're going to, do what we want. As long as you start a relationship off and are appreciative and respectful, it's a lot less likely that it's going to, go downhill. If it's going to go downhill, it's going to go downhill. But I think having a good rapport with everybody that you work with really comes around in full circle. And that goes with having a good relationship with your property manager so that if you are concerned, they're not going to object to running over and checking on your contractor in the middle of the day to make sure they're there. Right. And so much of this is relationships, and just being, to your point, very aware of which relationship you're going to have to hold your ground.
Yeah. I've actually I was working on one of my own properties, and I had the design for the closet very specific, set up a very specific way. And I was on vacation and the thing was all framed out and I thought we were good. And I came back and they reoriented where the door was going to be. I was like, why did you do that? Now I have this closet that's like 50 inches deep and about 18, 30 inches wide. I'm like, that's not, clearly that's not what I wanted. He's like, yeah, but then when the door's open, you wouldn't be able to get in the closet. I'm like, the closet's a coat closet. I don't need to get in the closet if the door's open, because then it's time. Do you understand? Like, it requires definitely a level of faith and great communication skills to make sure that everything that's getting done in a remote project is happening the way you want it to happen.
And to that point, for the most part, most of my BRRRRs are paint, new flooring, maybe some light fixtures, because it's kind of hard to mess up once you start. Yeah, I mean, I'm not too picky. It's the same gray and white,
Yeah.
but once you start having where it's actual touching the structure and that kind of thing, that's definitely where you run into those situations a bit more.
But yeah, and that's a great way to do it. You can very easily add a lot of value to a property just by making it look pretty and clean and right.
Yeah, now I will say you're probably able to force more appreciation, or value by doing that, that type of BRRRR. So that's kind of the trade-off that I take, for people to think about in terms of, there's definitely probably a correlation between how much you're doing to a house and your upside potential.
Well, but you also want to take into consideration that it takes time, right? If you're going to do a BRRRR and it's going to take you 3, 4, 5, 6 months to do it, what's happening to the market during that time? That's all time when you're paying money out and not getting money in. So, I mean, cash flow is king.
I mean, that's where I get, that market change is so gut wrenching, critical. I tried 2 flips. I didn't get totally killed in them. I probably broke even, but let's just say they aren't my thing. It's okay to try things and say, I did it. And it wasn't just because it was my first time and it was uncomfortable that I don't like it. It just isn't my thing.
Yeah. Well, and a flip, a lot of people think, oh, I made X amount. But then when you start looking at the tax ramifications, which I think a lot of people forget about, like, yeah, I just made $30,000. I'm like, for short-term capital gains, how much of that are you going to keep? It's just not even worth it, right? The amount of work that you have to do and the amount of effort and drama for a flip, it has to be a really sweet deal to make that work, in my opinion.
Exactly. No, I'm there with you. And, the one thing too, I always ask the people that I work with, what is your goal? Because flipping's great. And yeah, you can build up wealth quicker, maybe, but the second you stop working, the second you stop hustling, you don't have anything coming in.
Do you start with long-term or short-term rentals?
So started with long-term, and then sort of just fell into the short term. My agent in Kansas City, Missouri, so St. Joe's about 45 minutes north. So then I started to look a bit more in the city. And he's like, oh, Lindsay, you should really buy this as a short term. And me being West Coast based had a little bit of like who vacations, in Kansas City, Missouri.
Right.
Yeah, like what? Really? No, yeah, like funny, jokes on you. I'm not falling for this one. And thankfully I listened to him and we did buy a short-term rental and it did really well. Now there's the sexy markets like Sevierville and, Smokies, and we're in that as well. There's also those tried and true and steady ones. I will say we've started to pivot away from those a little bit because we're seeing a lot of the regulation change, a lot of market saturation. So I just work very closely to know my numbers and help, any of my students really run it and make sure, because I think this day, unless you're going to go big and go home and have something really unique in the area, it can be rough going.
Well, and as you said, a lot of towns and cities are changing their regulations to not allow short-term rentals. So if that's your whole business model and you're thinking, oh, it's going to be rented all the time, which of course is not going to happen. And second of all, that, you have no backup plan if you can't do short-term rentals for some reason. Yeah. That's not a good plan.
Yeah. And we experienced that, and hence we've had to pivot and, thank goodness. That's, I think, the other thing in the sense that real estate is so forgiving in so many ways, hold it for long enough, so many things you can do, that the house that we originally bought for short-term rental didn't really sell at the number we wanted, didn't really make sense long-term renting. And so now we've pivoted to do sober living and group home. Never in a million years would I have ever thought, but it's amazing to see with this single asset. And that's kind of why I like single family. It's not always the sexy thing that they're talking about on Bigger Pockets, and everybody multifamily wants hundreds of doors. You can move fast, and there's so many things you can do with a single family asset.
It's true. It's very versatile. And even, depending on how it's zoned, right? There are other options. You see some commercial applications and, obviously zoning would have been a factor for the sober living home as well. How did that come about? Like, where did you dream that one?
Yeah. Dream. So ironically, I hadn't really thought about it. We had a house up for long-term rent in Asheville, North Carolina, and a young woman responded to the ad and said, hey, I'd love to rent it. I'm going to pay you slightly over market rent if you let me rent it as a sober living home. And I thought, okay, first, young female entrepreneur, like, heck yeah, like what, let's help her out. My one ask is teach me. Right. And the amazing thing is, as long as you are with group homes, just providing nothing medical, nothing more than just rent, and it just happens to be rent by the bed versus rent by the house or rent by the room,
Right.
you don't need any certain license or regulation. Yeah, each city will have like a limit in terms of, no more than 11 people in a
Unrelated
house.
people. Yeah.
Exactly. But those needing rehab or support like that are protected class. So there's also certain flexibility there. And so it really was just something we kind of fell into. And then we partnered with another house in Kansas City, Missouri, one of the ones that we were pivoting to partner with, a charity, Oxford House. So we just, again, similar to that young woman, we rented to them and they run a sober living. And then for a couple of them, we've gone in and I'm, managing and running, and it's a whole nother type of business that we're learning. And it's
wow,
very rewarding, very interesting, time consuming, but really rewarding.
Yeah. I interviewed somebody probably a year ago now, and she had turned her home into senior housing for people, specifically for people with dementia. And so she had at that time 5 people living with her, and she was about to buy another one where she wasn't going to live, for 7 people. And she was just absolutely loving it.
I will say, you get to help people, and doing sales, I often, get shut down in my job and doctors are busy. I get it. But when I started doing this and I started networking with the rehab centers and the parole officers and all this, they wanted to give me their phone number. They wanted to give me their email. They were appreciative. They thanked me, and it was so wonderful to feel like I was making an impact. And being welcomed by the communities versus, oh, that real estate investor from California is doing a short-term rental down the street, like it's a very different kind of feel.
Are there subsidies and things for the people who live there?
Yeah. So it depends. We're doing it in different states. So, in Kansas City, there's a certain government dismiss, and you have to be, certified with the National Recovery Society. And then other ones, there's just local charities. And then, of course, if we were to like House of Veteran or something, Social Security, that type of thing. So it really varies depending on the area. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, sober living often tends to be not covered by insurance. So that's why there is such a need, especially for affordable options.
That's when they need help the most, right? When they really could use a hand up instead of just a lot more drama and paperwork and, rejection and stuff.
Yeah. And how do you get started if you don't have a place to start?
Throughout this, have you kept your other job? I mean, or did you go back to your job?
What has really been great about this is, when I went to business school and I graduated and I went back into healthcare and was climbing that corporate ladder in marketing, it didn't fill my cup. It wasn't my passion, but I was doing it because that's where there was the security and the long term. And I had pivoted just to kind of take a breather back into sales. But I had always thought the sales rep isn't going to be around forever in this model. I'm pigeonholing myself the more I do this. And I always had this constant fear of like, oh my gosh, my job could go away. I'm not going to retire in this job. And it was the constant kind of nag. And so I told myself it was just temporary. But now that I have the passive income and what I have with real estate, I can stay in this job because I want to, and I'm not afraid. And if I lose my job tomorrow, I'm fine because I have that other source of income and business that I've grown. So now I do my job because I love it. I can do both and be fulfilled and just feel really blessed that way. And so that's the gift in terms of my W-2 that real estate investing has given me.
And, there's nothing, you can't diminish the ease of getting started when you have W-2 income, right? Because if you say to a bank, oh, I'd really like to, get a mortgage on this property, they're probably going to look at your thing and say, sure, okay. Whereas if you're just an entrepreneur and you're like, I really want this property to be how I make money, they're like, yeah, well, you kind of need to have money in advance.
Yeah, 100%. And you have to, have 2 years as a, entrepreneur of tax returns to show. And it's really hard, which is I understand where the banks are coming from, but it's unfortunate. And so for those that are ready to jump in and quit your job tomorrow, like
rein that in a little.
Yeah. We can get you there. It's not a sprint.
Yeah. Well, and what you've defined is my definition of financial freedom. It's not that you're never going to work again. It's that you can just do whatever you enjoy doing and, do it your way. And if they fire you, tough shit for them, right? They lost somebody great and you're just going to go do something else that you absolutely love. So
right? And that's it. And I think, many people probably listening to your podcast and you and I couldn't not work. So we're going to always do something. So, remember that and just make sure that what you're filling most of your time with is what you want to be filling it with. Don't think of it as a job, but I'm going to be doing something with my time. So I might as well have a W-2 I enjoy.
That's one thing I'm old, so it's understandable that there'd be a generation gap, but the whole idea of FIRE, it's like retire. So I've interviewed people who are like 24, 25 years old. And I'm thinking, what are you going to do for the next potentially like 60, 70, 80 years? What are you going to do?
And it's interesting because you see people when they retire kind of deflate a little because it does fulfill you having a purpose, having something to get out, so, maybe those people eventually will start charities or do it. But again, you're working at something.
Right.
We need that.
We do. We need to have goals. I feel like I at least need to have something that's pushing me along. And as much as I love to travel and love to, buy things and have a good time and stuff like that, it loses its flavor when that's all you do. I think.
No, I've been on vacations and by the fourth or fifth day, I'm bringing my computer down to the pool and I'm like, this is cool, but I want to work. I want to, and like,
but it's a whole different relationship that you have with your job because it's your choice to be there.
Yes. And I think that was the most interesting thing when I first started this, I was grinding pretty hard, but it didn't feel like work. Right. I finally got it when you see all these entrepreneurs that make millions and billions. I used to work in private equity and I was like, why are these guys still working? Like they're the richest men on the planet, but for them, it wasn't a job. And for me, it wasn't a job. It was my passion, which was it was interesting to finally, switch from that mindset of an employee to an entrepreneur.
How much time do you spend? I don't know what I was trying to say there. How much time do you spend doing real estate related management and tasks and stuff on like, say, a weekly or monthly basis?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things, that's helped me is building a team internally. So I have a full-time virtual assistant, which has changed my life. And so in some ways, I almost have too much time on my hands now that, everything's kind of up and going and systems are set and we're not in a, growth phase right now. All our capital's deployed and things like that. So, I spend maybe an hour a day, 2 hours a day, just kind of depending on what's going on. The sober living thing has been a much bigger lift, but just with my long-term rentals, they're set it and forget it for the most part. And we self-manage some and we have property managers for others. So it's not that we're not, involved in the day in, day out of some of them. But when you get your systems in place, it really can be a lift at the beginning, but nice after that.
Well, and you brought up a very good point because any time that I've interviewed a real estate investor who's successful, they always talk about systems. And there are a lot of real estate investors out there who don't have any systems, but they're not on this show. You need to know what you're doing. You can't just do the whole thing by the seat of your pants and expect to really succeed.
100%. And it's funny because, my team, my business partner, and one of my business partners is also my brother. So the three of us, I am that person that's like, we're going to use Monday.com and I'm going to bug you every weekly meeting. I know you don't want, but like, we have to have a system. We have to, you're blessed to be in a spot where you need to do a system for things and you're that big versus not needing a system because it is only one or two houses. So it's a catch-22, but I am that person that I feel like I don't want to say the person who nags, but somebody's got to do it. Right. And they all, once they get on board, they all end up thanking me.
Even when you have one or two properties, if you want to have more, you might as well set yourself up from property one with a system that's going to allow you to grow more organically and not just like every single one is like reinventing the wheel. What's, say, your favorite part of an average week?
My favorite part of an average week is being able to sit down and go through those systems, real estate related, and be able to sit back and think strategically at this point, right? So for a while there, I think I was just learning and go, and just kind of almost reactive. Now, when I get to this point, I get to sit back, I get to read about what's going on a little bit more in depth and think, do I want to pivot? Do I want to move into Section 8? Like, so I'm at a point now where I feel like I've got a really good foundation and now I can think, where do I want to take that next? And so I think I really enjoy that. And then I was sharing with you a little bit, moving into the sober living, when I get to connect last night, I got a wonderful text from one of our new residents just saying, Lindsay, I just want to, hey, my name's such and such. I just want to let you know, I'm so excited to be somewhere where I feel like I can have a home, but also really nice. Because one of our goals with our houses is not to just have just a basic dumpy house and put a bunch of people in there.
Yeah.
And he was just really blown away by that, but still making it affordable. And so those are the moments I think that are my favorite throughout the week.
What kinds of things do you look at when you're going into a new market?
I think it's really easy to get wrapped around in the data, but the basics that I, work with and work with my students, I look at is, is the population growing or shrinking? What is the average income doing in that area? What is the median value of the house and how has that gone recently? And I say this almost in ways that you don't always want to go where the median home value has shot up in the past couple of years, because that probably means it may have already peaked and coming back down with everything that we've seen, like Boise, like places in Arizona. And so, there's no perfect data point, but always things to think about. Also landlord friendly. That's one of the biggest things I want to look at, because at the end of the day, the support that you have of the local legal system
Municipality. In the
makes,
state,
yeah,
it definitely
exactly.
makes a difference.
Yeah.
Property in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and the difference between who's in charge, the tenant or the landlord, is huge.
Yeah. And it can be scary and so frustrating. And, we all want to think that the law makes sense and is fair. And unfortunately, it doesn't always meet those two boxes. So,
Always work that way.
yeah. And then one of the things that I'm starting to look at a little bit more and working with my students is climate change. So, how is heat going to impact? Is it a big agricultural area that's going to have, huge increase that we think? How does that play into knowing that a lot of my purchases are for long-term holds?
And things that, like, what's this worth today? Is anyone going to want to live here 10
Right?
years from now? Right?
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
a wasteland of some kind, right?
Exactly. And, and I don't want to have another job, right? So I want to buy and hold.
So what kind of advice would you give to people who are thinking that they maybe could try this, especially now when it's a little bit less friendly environment as far as interest rates and things like that go?
So first, I would say it's always an equation, right? And there's always going to be one variable in the equation that you're not in love with. Right now it's rates. Before it was the number of bids, it was the pricing, it was the all cash offers. I think now's a great time to buy, because you are actually not getting outbid. The prices, it's not a seller's market. So all that matters is, as long as whatever that interest variable rate works, I don't care if it's 2%, I don't care if it's 16%. If my equation comes out to what meets my buy box, then I'm going for it. We've bought, 12, 15 properties in the last 6 months, even with the rates where they are. And the beautiful thing to remind people is it's never going to go up. As long as you don't, get a variable, assuming you're getting a 30-year fixed, your payment's only going to go down. I'm totally forgetting now what the question, what I'm looking at.
Yeah. When you're going into a new market, what kinds of things
I'm going to, yeah. And then the other thing is the agent. So can I get a reliable agent? Because I really wanted to go into Omaha and could not get an agent that was willing to work with me on off-market deals that would call me back, and just couldn't get traction there. And so for me, if I can't have a team on the ground that I rely on, I didn't go into that market.
And I actually forgot that wasn't the question that I asked you. That was the question before the question. So the most recent question was, what would you tell people who are thinking that they'd like to get started, even though the interest rates aren't that great?
Set a action line. I like to call it that instead of a deadline. Because I know people that for 3 years now, my friend's husband has been looking at real estate, but there's such the opportunity cost, and the market's never going to be what you think is perfect. But we always look back on the last market we had and say, we should have done that. So don't keep doing that to yourself. So get a number that you're comfortable with and set an action line. And then I think it's huge, whether formally or informally, find a mentor, find a coach, find a mastermind. You're not in this alone, and it's okay to ask for help. Having been, a straight A nerdy student, I felt like it was cheating, and it's not. It's totally okay. And people want to help you. So find that.
Yeah. It's not just not cheating. It's really the smart thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why make every mistake yourself?
Right. When somebody else has already done it a million times and happy to help you.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's fun. It's a lot more fun doing it with someone else.
And there's
Excellent.
so much skill stuff that I don't know I didn't know.
And you offer coaching though, right, Lindsay? You offer coaching as part of your many hats that you have.
I do. So one of the things getting involved in this, and in the syndication company that I started, I was working with a lot of women that either were recently divorced or single moms. And just, I don't know if it's something that just our generation or what, we were just not necessarily always taught to think about making our money work for us. We're always taught to save, and not take risk.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed working with them so much that I started the Millionaires March, which is my coaching program. Originally, I was going to focus just on women, but ironically, I have 50% men, 50% women, which is great. And it's a 90-day course to purchase your first rental property by the end of it. And then I also do, for those I have people that already own but want to make like the next moves, just regular coaching as well for whatever people need. So really, that's what fills my cup is, where are you at? How can I help?
Is there any question that I didn't ask you that you wish I would have asked you?
Taking a little bit of risk, and what's the most important thing to be thinking about when you're looking at the future is, I always was a big saver, but I think velocity might be like the word to remember here, whether it's velocity in your learning, your personal life, your goals, or your money. You want to make sure that your money's working for you, because that's how you're going to get to the lifestyle that you want to have. And there's lots of different ways to do that, whether it's through real estate or other ways. But I think we sometimes get so done up in accomplishing the tasks, but we don't realize that those are not necessarily moving things forward.
So, Lindsay, how can people reach you if they want to take your coaching, or if they just want to say you're awesome?
Well, I would love to connect with people. If you can't tell, I love chatting and connecting and helping. So anybody that wants to set up just a free 30-minute strategy session, so I can point you in the right direction, you can go to millionairesmarchfreestrategysession.com. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Lindsay Lovell on Instagram and Facebook and all those fun things.
Excellent. And all those links will be in the show notes, so you don't have to get in a car crash trying to write them down. Lindsay, thanks so much. I love talking with you. You're super.
You're so sweet. I appreciate that. It was great. I appreciate you having me on, Christine, and letting me talk. And it was wonderful chatting with you both now and before. So thank you so much.
Oh, you know what? One last question, because I think this is going to air right before New Year's. Do you have any sort of like rituals or things that you do to start the new year off on a good foot?
Yes. I think one of the most important things is to take a step back and look at my organizational systems, because I have spent too many Christmases going back through for tax documents or, trying to get this appraisal together. And so I like to sit down and just say, I'm going to, give my inbox a day or two off. It'll be there. And what systems do I just need to sit down and think about strategically? So it's kind of like that looking back and setting myself up for the next year.
Thank you. And thank you so much, listener, for listening. Who think right now, at least I bet you know more than 3 people who you can share this episode with, people who will really benefit from Lindsay's really nice, simple way of getting started, simple way of expressing herself, and somebody who's been thinking about real estate investing, who hasn't actually pulled the trigger, or even somebody who has and isn't enjoying it as much as they thought they would. Share this episode with them. Let them listen to Lindsay. They can give her a call or get on her calendar, and they will definitely thank you. And I thank you. Have a wonderful week.